Marcus Thompson sat at his desk, staring at the email on his computer screen. His heart beat faster as he read the message for the third time. TechVision Solutions wanted to interview him for a senior developer position. This was not just any job. This was the job he had dreamed about for months. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. TechVision was one of the best technology companies in the country. They worked on artificial intelligence projects that changed how people used computers. Marcus had followed their work for years. He had even used their software in his own projects. Now they wanted to talk to him about joining their team. Marcus was 35 years old. He had worked as a software engineer for 10 years. His career had been successful by any measure. He graduated from MIT, one of the best universities in the world. After graduation, he worked for 2 Fortune 500 companies. At both places, he became a lead developer. He led teams that built important software. He even had 3 patents in artificial intelligence technology. His name was on inventions that other engineers studied and used. But Marcus wanted more. He wanted to work on projects that excited him. He wanted to solve problems that mattered. TechVision offered exactly that kind of work. Their job posting described projects in machine learning and data analysis. These were areas where Marcus had deep knowledge. He knew he could do excellent work for them. "Sarah," he called out to his wife. "They want to interview me." Sarah came into the room, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. She had been making dinner for their family. Her face lit up when she saw Marcus's expression. "TechVision?" she asked. "Yes. The interview is next Tuesday at 10 in the morning." Sarah walked over and hugged him. "I knew they would call you. Your application was perfect for that job." Marcus hugged her back. They had been married for 8 years. Sarah knew how much this opportunity meant to him. She had listened to him talk about TechVision for months. She had reviewed his application before he sent it. She believed in him completely. Their 2 children ran into the room. 7-year-old Mia and 5-year-old Jordan wanted to know why their parents were excited. Marcus picked up Jordan and explained that he had an important job interview. Mia asked if this meant they could get a puppy. Marcus laughed. He told her they would talk about puppies later. That evening, after the children went to bed, Marcus began preparing for the interview. He opened his laptop and started researching. He read everything he could find about TechVision. He studied their recent projects. He learned about their company culture. He read interviews with their CEO and other leaders. He wanted to know everything about the company before he walked into that building. Marcus also reviewed his own work. He organized his portfolio of projects. He prepared examples of problems he had solved. He thought about questions they might ask. He practiced his answers. He knew that preparation was the key to success. Over the next few days, Marcus spent every free moment getting ready. He reviewed technical concepts. He solved practice coding problems. He made sure his knowledge was sharp. Sarah helped by asking him practice interview questions. She pretended to be the interviewer while Marcus answered. This practice made him feel more confident. On Monday night, the evening before the interview, Marcus laid out his clothes. He chose a dark blue suit, a white shirt, and a conservative tie. He polished his shoes until they shined. He printed extra copies of his resume on good paper. He put everything in his leather briefcase. He wanted to look professional and prepared. Sarah made his favorite dinner that night. The whole family ate together. Mia told Marcus that he was the smartest daddy in the world. Jordan said he would be a computer engineer just like Marcus when he grew up. Sarah reminded Marcus of all his achievements. She told him that TechVision would be lucky to have him. "Just be yourself," Sarah said as they got ready for bed. "Show them what you can do. You have earned this opportunity." Marcus nodded. He felt ready. He had the skills. He had the experience. He had the knowledge. This interview would go well. He was sure of it. Tuesday morning arrived bright and clear. Marcus woke up early. He showered, shaved, and dressed carefully. He ate a good breakfast. Sarah drove him to the interview because parking downtown was difficult. She dropped him off in front of TechVision's building at 9:30. "Good luck," she said, kissing him on the cheek. "Call me when it's over." Marcus stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the building. TechVision occupied floors 5 through 12 of a modern glass tower. The building reflected the morning sun. It looked impressive and professional. Marcus took a deep breath. Then he walked through the revolving door into the lobby. The lobby was beautiful. It had marble floors and modern furniture. Plants grew in large pots near the windows. A water feature made soft sounds in one corner. Everything looked expensive and well-maintained. Marcus felt impressed. This was clearly a successful company. He walked to the security desk and showed his identification. The guard checked his name on a list and gave him a visitor badge. The guard directed him to the elevators and told him to go to the 5th floor. Someone from Human Resources would meet him there. Marcus rode the elevator up. His stomach felt tight with nervous energy. This was normal before big interviews. He reminded himself to breathe deeply and stay calm. The elevator doors opened on the 5th floor. The 5th floor reception area was just as nice as the lobby. Modern art hung on the walls. Comfortable chairs sat in the waiting area. A young woman sat at the reception desk. She smiled when Marcus approached. "Good morning," Marcus said. "I'm Marcus Thompson. I have a 10 o'clock interview." "Welcome, Mr. Thompson," the receptionist said. She typed something on her computer. "Please have a seat. Someone will come to get you in just a few minutes." Marcus sat down in one of the comfortable chairs. He looked around the office. Through glass walls, he could see people working at their desks. Everyone looked busy and focused. The office had an energy that Marcus liked. This seemed like a place where good work happened. A few minutes later, a woman walked into the reception area. She was in her 40s wearing a business suit. She smiled at Marcus and extended her hand. "Mr. Thompson, I'm Jennifer Morris, department manager. Welcome to Tech Vision. Please follow me." Marcus shook her hand and followed her down a hallway. Jennifer made small talk as they walked. She asked about his drive to the office. She commented on the nice weather. Marcus answered politely. Everything seemed normal and professional. Jennifer led him to a conference room. The room had a large table and comfortable chairs. Big windows showed a view of the city. 2 men were already sitting at the table. They stood up when Marcus entered. "This is Derek Hastings, our HR director," Jennifer said, pointing to a man in his 50s with gray hair. "And this is Brad Kaufman, our technical lead." Marcus shook hands with both men. Everyone sat down. Derek opened a folder with Marcus's resume inside. Brad opened a laptop computer. Jennifer poured water into glasses for everyone. The interview was about to begin. "So Marcus," Derek said, looking at the resume, "tell us about yourself." Marcus began to speak. He talked about his education at MIT. He described his work experience. He explained his interest in Tech Vision's projects. He spoke clearly and confidently. This was going exactly as he had practiced. The 3 interviewers listened. They nodded occasionally. They took notes. For the first 10 minutes, everything felt normal. Marcus started to relax. Then Derek looked more closely at the resume. He pointed to one of Marcus's previous employers. "You worked at DataCore Systems?" Derek asked. His voice had a slight edge that had not been there before. "Yes," Marcus said. "I was a lead developer there for 3 years." Derek looked at Brad and Jennifer. Something passed between them. A look that Marcus could not quite read. The atmosphere in the room shifted slightly. Marcus felt it but could not explain what had changed. "Interesting," Derek said slowly. He looked back at Marcus. His expression was different now. Less welcoming. More skeptical. Marcus sat up straighter in his chair. Something was wrong. He could feel it. But the interview was just beginning. He would have to wait and see what happened next. Derek leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. He looked at Marcus with an expression that made Marcus uncomfortable. It was not exactly hostile, but it was not friendly either. It was the look someone gives when they have already decided something negative. "So you say you were a lead developer at DataCore?" Derek said. The way he said "you say" made it sound like he did not believe Marcus. That's a pretty big responsibility for someone with your background. Marcus felt confused. "My background?" he asked. "I'm not sure what you mean. I have 10 years of experience in software development." Derek waved his hand dismissively. Yes. I can read a resume. But being a lead developer means managing teams, making important decisions, writing complex code. Did you actually do all of that yourself? Or did you have a lot of help from your team?" The question felt wrong. Marcus had interviewed for many jobs over the years. Interviewers always asked about teamwork, but they usually asked about collaboration in a positive way. Derek was asking if Marcus had needed help, as if that would be evidence that Marcus was not really qualified. "I led a team of 8 developers," Marcus explained. He kept his voice calm and professional. "Of course we worked together. That's what a team does." But I was responsible for architecture decisions, code reviews, and final implementations. I can show you examples of my work if you would like. Brad, the technical lead, spoke up. That won't be necessary right now. He typed something on his laptop without looking at Marcus. I'm just curious about something. At your previous companies, were there diversity initiatives? Special programs for hiring? Marcus felt his stomach tighten. He knew where this was going. He had faced these questions before in his career, though usually they were more subtle. Brad was asking if Marcus had been a diversity hire instead of someone hired for his actual skills. I was hired based on my qualifications, Marcus said firmly. The same qualifications that are on my resume. My IT degree, strong technical skills, proven track record. Jennifer jumped in. Her voice had a sweet tone that did not match the rudeness of her words. Of course. No one is questioning that. It's just that companies these days have all sorts of programs, quotas, special considerations, that sort of thing. We just want to understand your full background. My full background is on my resume, Marcus said. He could feel anger building inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. I graduated in the top 15% of my class at MIT. I have 3 patents in AI technology. My work has been cited in technical journals. I believe my qualifications speak for themselves. Derek made a sound that was almost a laugh. MIT, right? Very impressive. Again, his tone suggested he did not actually find it impressive. Tell me, Marcus, how exactly did you get into MIT? That's a very competitive school. The question was completely inappropriate. Marcus knew it. They knew it. But they asked anyway. They were implying that Marcus could not have gotten into MIT on his own merit. That somehow he had received special consideration because he was black. Marcus took a slow breath. He needed this job. His family depended on his income, but he also had his dignity. He decided to answer the question directly and let his record speak for itself. I was accepted to MIT because I had excellent grades, high test scores, and strong recommendations from my teachers. I studied hard in high school. I earned my place there, and I graduated with honors, which proves I belonged there. Brad pulled up something on his laptop. Let's talk about technical skills. Can you explain the difference between supervised and unsupervised machine learning? This was a basic question. Any entry-level developer would know the answer. Marcus had been working with machine learning for years. He had published papers on the subject. Asking him this question was like asking a surgeon if they knew where the heart was located. Marcus answered anyway. He explained supervised learning, where algorithms learn from labeled data. He explained unsupervised learning, where algorithms find patterns in unlabeled data. He gave examples of each. He spoke clearly and demonstrated deep knowledge. Brad and Derek exchanged glances. They did not look pleased that Marcus had answered well. Jennifer wrote something in her notebook. Anyone can memorize definitions, Brad said. Let's see if you can actually solve problems. He pulled up a coding challenge on his laptop and turned the screen so Marcus could see it. It was a problem about sorting algorithms and efficiency. Brad and Derek leaned back in their chairs with smug expressions. They were clearly testing Marcus, waiting for him to fail. Marcus looked at the problem. It was moderately difficult, but nothing he had not seen before. He asked if he could use the whiteboard in the conference room. Brad nodded. Marcus stood up and began writing. He wrote out his thought process. He explained the problem. He discussed different possible solutions. He talked about the time complexity of each approach. Then he wrote out clean, efficient code that solved the problem. It took him less than 10 minutes. When he finished, he turned to face the interviewers. Derek and Brad looked annoyed. They had clearly hoped he would struggle. Marcus sat back down and waited for their response. Well, Derek said slowly, that was adequate. Though the problem was not very difficult. Marcus felt stunned. Adequate? He had solved it quickly and correctly. If the problem was not difficult, why had they given it to him? But he said nothing. He just waited. Jennifer spoke next. Let's talk about culture fit. Tech Vision has a very particular way of doing things. We're a fast-paced environment, very demanding, very professional. Do you think you would be comfortable here? I've worked in fast-paced environments my entire career, Marcus said. I'm comfortable with demanding work. That's what I'm looking for. Yes, but those were other companies, Jennifer said. She smiled, but the smile did not reach her eyes. This is different. We have very high standards. We expect people to fit in with our existing team. to understand our culture. Do you really think you could keep up with the pace here? The message was clear. They were telling Marcus that he did not belong, that he would not fit in. They were not saying it directly, but the meaning was obvious. They were questioning whether a black man could work in their professional, predominantly white office. Marcus looked at each of them. Derek sat with his arms crossed, looking skeptical. Brad had a slight smirk on his face. Jennifer maintained her fake smile. These people had no intention of hiring him fairly. They had decided before he even walked into the room, but Marcus was not going to make it easy for them. He had worked too hard, come too far to simply accept discrimination without speaking up. I have kept up with demanding work my entire career, Marcus said. His voice was steady but firm. I have exceeded expectations at every company I've worked for. I have led successful projects, mentored junior developers, and contributed to my field through patents and publications. I am confident I can not only keep up with the work here but excel at it. Derek leaned forward. That's quite a confident statement. Maybe too confident. You know, Marcus, attitude is important in a workplace. We need people who are team players. People who don't have chips on their shoulders. People who can take feedback without getting defensive. Marcus almost laughed. He had not been defensive. He had simply stated facts about his career. But now Derek was accusing him of having a bad attitude. This was a common tactic. When discrimination is challenged, the person being discriminated against gets accused of being difficult or having attitude problems. Brad opened a folder and pulled out papers. Let's discuss compensation. The posted salary range for this position is $90,000 to $110,000. Based on what we've seen today, we think $70,000 would be appropriate for you. Marcus stared at him. $70,000 was 40% below the minimum posted range. It was an insult. It was also illegal to offer someone a salary that far below the posted range without clear justification. The posting said 90 to 110, Marcus said slowly. I have 10 years of experience. I have led teams. I have patents. Why would you offer me $70,000? Jennifer answered, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We just think that's appropriate given everything we've discussed today. You have to understand, the posted range assumes a certain level of proven ability. We would need to see you demonstrate that ability before offering the full range. I have demonstrated ability, Marcus said. It's documented in my resume and my work history. Derek shook his head. A resume is just paper, Marcus. What we've seen today is someone who might be able to do the work or might not. $70,000 is a fair starting point. You could always work your way up. Marcus sat in silence for a moment. These people were offering him less than what new graduates were making. They were doing it because they did not respect him. They did not respect his education, his experience, or his achievements. They saw a black man and decided he was worth less. He thought about his family. He thought about his children. He thought about Sarah waiting for his call. He thought about all the times in his life when people had underestimated him. All the times he had to work twice as hard to get half as much recognition. Part of him wanted to stand up and walk out, to tell these people exactly what he thought of them, to refuse to be disrespected this way. Derek picked up his pen and tapped it against the table. He looked at Marcus with an expression that was openly hostile now. Any pretense of professionalism had disappeared. The three interviewers had stopped even trying to hide their bias. Let's talk about your urban background, Derek said. He said the word urban in a way that made it clear he meant something else entirely. Have you worked in corporate environments before? Real corporate environments, not startups or small companies? Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Both of his previous employers had been Fortune 500 corporations. They were as corporate as companies could get. His resume clearly stated this. Derek was not asking a real question. He was making an accusation wrapped in question form. Both Data Core Systems and TechFlow Industries are Fortune 500 companies, Marcus said. He kept his voice level even though anger burned in his chest. I worked in their main corporate offices. I reported to senior vice presidents. I presented to executive leadership. I am very comfortable in corporate environments. Jennifer wrote something in her notebook. Whatever she wrote, it made Brad smile. They were enjoying this. They were getting pleasure from making Marcus defend his basic qualifications over and over again. The thing is, Brad said, leaning forward, corporate culture is about more than just working in a big building. It's about fitting in, understanding unspoken rules, knowing how to communicate with colleagues, Some people just don't have that natural understanding. It's not their fault. They just come from different backgrounds. Marcus knew exactly what Brad meant by different backgrounds. He meant that Marcus was black, and black people supposedly did not understand corporate culture. It was a racist assumption wrapped in polite language. Marcus had heard variations of this his entire career. I have successfully worked with colleagues from diverse backgrounds throughout my career, Marcus said. I have built strong professional relationships. I have mentored team members. I have presented to clients and stakeholders. Communication and professionalism are strengths of mine, not weaknesses. Derek made a dismissive gesture. You keep talking about your career like it's so impressive. But let's be honest here, Marcus. How much of your success was really you, and how much was your team covering for you? How much was affirmative action policies protecting you? The accusation hung in the air. Derek had finally said it plainly. He believed that Marcus had not actually earned his success, that Marcus had been carried by others or protected by diversity policies, that his MIT degree, his patents, his 10 years of success were somehow not real achievements. Marcus felt something snap inside him. Not his composure, not yet, but his hope that this interview might somehow turn around. These people had decided who he was before meeting him. Nothing he said or did would change their minds. I earned every position I have held, Marcus said. His voice was quiet but firm. I earned my place at MIT through hard work and academic excellence. I earned my promotions through strong performance. I earned my patents through innovation and technical expertise. I have never asked for special treatment. I have simply asked to be evaluated fairly based on my work. Brad pulled his laptop closer. Let's test that claim. I'm going to give you a real challenge, something that will show us if you actually have the skills you claim. He opened a file and showed Marcus a complex coding problem. This one was genuinely difficult. It involved optimizing database queries, managing memory efficiently, and handling edge cases. It was the kind of problem that might take an experienced developer an hour or more to solve completely. You have 15 minutes, Brad said. He smirked at Derek. Let's see how well he does under pressure. Marcus looked at the problem. He could solve it, but 15 minutes was barely enough time. Brad was not testing Marcus's ability. He was setting Marcus up to fail so they could claim he was not qualified. May I use the whiteboard again? Marcus asked. Sure, Brad said. Clock starts now. Marcus stood and walked to the whiteboard. He picked up a marker and began writing. His mind worked quickly, breaking down the problem into smaller pieces. He wrote pseudocode first, outlining his approach. Then he began writing actual code. His handwriting was neat despite his speed. He explained his thinking as he worked, talking through each decision. He identified the bottlenecks in the database queries. He wrote functions to handle edge cases. He optimized the memory usage. Derek and Jennifer watched with expressions that grew increasingly sour. They had expected Marcus to struggle. Instead, he was methodically solving a difficult problem while explaining his reasoning clearly. At 14 minutes, Marcus stepped back from the whiteboard. Done, he said. Brad stood up and walked over to examine the code. He spent several minutes looking at it, trying to find errors. Marcus could see the frustration on Brad's face. The code was correct. It was also elegant and efficient. It's adequate, Brad finally said, though you took almost the full 15 minutes. A truly skilled developer would have been faster. Marcus wanted to laugh. 15 minutes had been an unreasonable time limit for this problem. He had solved it completely in 14 minutes. That should have been impressive. But Brad was determined not to give Marcus credit for anything. Marcus sat back down. He was tired now. Not physically tired, but emotionally exhausted. He had been defending himself for over an hour. He had answered every question correctly. He had solved every technical challenge. And none of it mattered because these three people had decided not to see his qualifications. Jennifer looked at her watch. We're running a bit long. Let's talk about work style. Marcus, how do you handle criticism? When someone tells you that your work isn't up to standard? I listen to the feedback, Marcus said. I ask questions to understand the concerns. I work to address the issues. I believe in continuous improvement. But what if the criticism makes you uncomfortable? Jennifer pressed. What if you feel like you're being judged unfairly? Marcus saw the trap in the question. If he said criticism made him uncomfortable, they would say he could not handle feedback. If he said he felt judged unfairly, they would say he was defensive and had attitude problems. I focus on the work, Marcus said carefully. I try to separate personal feelings from professional feedback. My goal is always to produce the best work possible. Derek jumped in. That sounds good in theory. But in practice, some people just can't handle corporate environments. They always feel like they're being discriminated against. They see racism everywhere. It creates problems for the whole team. Marcus stared at Derek. This was not even subtle anymore. Derek was directly telling Marcus that if he experienced discrimination at TechVision, it would be his fault for noticing it. That racism was not a real problem, just something oversensitive people imagined. I focus on doing excellent work, Marcus repeated. That has been my approach throughout my career. Brad closed his laptop. Look, Marcus, let me be straight with you. We're just not sure you're the right fit for this position.
Maybe you would be more comfortable in a junior role.
Or perhaps an internship where you could learn our systems before taking on real responsibility. Marcus almost could not believe what he was hearing. An internship? He had 10 years of experience. He had led teams.
He had patents.
And Brad was suggesting he start as an intern? The position I applied for is a senior developer role, Marcus said. That matches my experience level. I have been a senior developer and team lead for 5 years. Jennifer gave him that fake sympathetic smile again. We understand that's what you think. But we have to evaluate candidates based on what we see in the interview. And honestly, Marcus, we're not seeing senior level ability here. Maybe you were promoted too quickly at your other companies. It happens sometimes. The implication was clear. Jennifer was saying that Marcus's previous employers had promoted him, not because he deserved it, but because of diversity initiatives. She was saying that his success was fake, unearned. Marcus sat very still. He thought about standing up and leaving. Just walking out of this conference room in this building and never looking back. But he remained seated. Some part of him wanted to see how far they would go, how blatant their discrimination would become. I have documentation of my work, Marcus said quietly. Performance reviews, project completions, patents, all of it supports my qualifications. Documents can be misleading, Derek said. He waved his hand dismissively. What we care about is what we see in this room. And frankly, you're not showing us senior-level thinking. You're showing us someone who might be able to do basic work with a lot of supervision. Brad nodded in agreement. That's why we mentioned the $70,000 salary earlier. It's actually generous for someone who would need as much supervision as you would. Marcus wanted to ask them how they could possibly know he would need supervision. He had solved every problem they gave him. He had answered every technical question correctly. But he knew the answer. They knew he would need supervision because they had decided that before he walked in the door. Through the glass walls of the conference room, Marcus could see other employees walking by. Some of them glanced in as they passed. A few looked uncomfortable as if they could sense what was happening inside, but no one stopped. No one intervened. Derek was about to speak when there was a firm knock on the conference room door. Everyone turned to look. Before anyone could respond, the door opened. 3 people walked into the room. The first was a man in his early 50s, Asian, wearing an expensive suit. He had the bearing of someone used to authority. Behind him came a woman in her 60s, Hispanic, with sharp, intelligent eyes. The third person was a younger white man, clearly an assistant carrying a tablet. The room went completely silent. Derek, Brad, and Jennifer looked shocked. Their confident expressions disappeared instantly. Derek actually stood up from his chair. Mr. Park, Derek stammered, we didn't know you were in the building today. The man in the suit was James Park, CEO of TechVision Solutions. Marcus recognized him from the company website. Next to him was Dr. Helen Rodriguez, who Marcus now remembered was on the board of directors. She oversaw human resources and compliance. James looked at the 3 interviewers with an expression that was hard to read. Not angry exactly, but definitely not pleased. His eyes moved to Marcus, who was still sitting at the table. James nodded politely at him. We were doing a facility walkthrough, James said. His voice was calm but carried weight. We happened to pass by. Through the glass walls, we noticed this interview seemed unusual. Brad tried to smile. Just a standard interview, Mr. Park. Nothing unusual about it. Really? Dr. Rodriguez said. Her voice was sharp. Because from what we observed, it looked like this candidate was being treated quite differently than standard. Jennifer's face went pale. I'm sure you misunderstood what you saw. We were just being thorough with our questions. The third person, James's assistant, stepped forward. Actually, We received reports from several employees. They expressed concern about what they were witnessing as they walked past this conference room. Marcus sat very still. He did not know what was happening, but something was shifting. The power dynamic in the room had changed completely. Derek, Brad, and Jennifer looked nervous now. Scared even. James walked closer to the table. "Mr. Thompson, correct?" he asked Marcus. "Yes, sir," Marcus said. "I apologize for interrupting your interview, but I would like to ask you to stay for a few more minutes. Would that be all right?" Marcus nodded. He had no idea what was going on, but he was willing to see where this led. James turned to Derek. "May I see the candidate's application materials?" Derek hesitated, then handed over the folder. James opened it and began reading. His eyebrows rose slightly as he scanned Marcus's resume. Dr. Rodriguez looked over his shoulder, reading along. "MIT graduate." James said aloud. 10 years of experience. Lead developer at Data Core Systems and TechFlow Industries. 3 patents in artificial intelligence. He looked up at the 3 interviewers. "These are impressive qualifications." "Yes, well," Derek began, but James held up his hand. "I wasn't finished." James continued reading. Recommendations from senior vice presidents at both previous companies. Published papers in technical journals. Led multiple successful projects with documented results. He closed the folder. "This is exactly the kind of candidate we want at TechVision." Brad tried to recover. "With all respect, Mr. Park, a resume only tells part of the story. We need to assess candidates based on what we see in the interview, and we had some concerns about Mr. Thompson's fit for our culture." "Culture fit," Dr. Rodriguez repeated. Her tone made those words sound dirty. "That's interesting. Tell me, what specifically about Mr. Thompson made you question his culture fit?" The 3 interviewers looked at each other. No one wanted to answer. They knew that anything they said would reveal their bias. James pointed to the whiteboard, which still had Marcus's code from the last challenge. "Is this Mr. Thompson's work?" "Yes," Brad admitted. "And did he solve the problem correctly?" Brad hesitated. "Yes, and the first problem? Did he solve that correctly as well?" "Yes." James looked at Dr. Rodriguez. She nodded and pulled out her phone. She typed something quickly. "Mr. Thompson," James said, turning to Marcus, "I would like to hear your perspective on this interview. Would you please tell me, honestly and directly, how you have been treated today?" Marcus looked at the 3 interviewers. They were staring at him with expressions that mixed fear and anger. They were silently warning him not to speak up. But Marcus was tired of staying silent. He was tired of accepting discrimination. "They have been disrespectful from the start," Marcus said quietly. "They questioned whether I actually earned my MIT degree. They suggested I was a diversity hire who did not deserve my positions. They asked if my team had to cover for my lack of ability. They offered me a salary 40% below the posted range. They suggested I would be better suited for an internship, despite my 10 years of experience." Derek tried to interrupt. "That's not what we—" "Please let him finish," Dr. Rodriguez said sharply. Marcus continued. "They questioned whether I understood corporate culture. They used phrases like urban background and asked if I would be comfortable in a professional environment. They implied that any success I have had was due to affirmative action policies, not my actual abilities. Every time I correctly answered a question or solved a problem, they dismissed it and gave me harder challenges. Nothing I did was good enough because they had already decided I was not qualified before I sat down." The room was silent. Derek looked furious. Brad stared at the table. Jennifer's fake smile had completely disappeared. James pulled out his phone. "This conference room has video recording, correct? Standard security protocol for all meeting spaces." Derek's face went white. "Video recording? I don't think it's company policy," Dr. Rodriguez said. "All conference rooms record video and audio for security and compliance purposes. You signed acknowledgement of this policy when you were hired." She looked at James's assistant. "Please retrieve the recording from this conference room." Starting from the beginning of the interview, the assistant nodded and began typing on his tablet. "It will take a few minutes to pull up the file." James turned back to the 3 interviewers. "While we wait for that, let me ask some questions. Derek, why did you offer Mr. Thompson $70,000 when the posted range for this position is $90,000 to $110,000? Derek tried to answer confidently, but his voice shook. "Based on the interview, we felt that was the appropriate compensation level." "Based on what aspects of the interview?" Dr. Rodriguez asked. "Mr. Park just confirmed that Mr. Thompson solved all the technical challenges correctly. His resume shows extensive experience. What justified offering him 40% less than the minimum posted salary? Derek had no answer. James looked at Brad. You said Mr. Thompson might be more comfortable in a junior position or internship. What led you to that conclusion? I just thought, Brad started. Did you think? Or did you assume based on something other than his qualifications? Brad's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Jennifer tried to save the situation. I think there has been a misunderstanding. We were simply conducting a thorough interview. It's our job to ask tough questions. Tough questions are appropriate, Dr. Rodriguez said. But there's a difference between tough questions and discriminatory questions. Asking about someone's urban background? Suggesting they don't understand corporate culture? Assuming they needed help from their team to succeed? Those are not tough questions. Those are biased assumptions. James's assistant looked up from his tablet. I have the recording ready, Mr. Park. Good, James said. We'll review it in detail. But first, I want to speak with Mr. Thompson privately. Derek, Brad, Jennifer, please wait in separate offices. Someone from Human Resources will call you shortly. Do not discuss this interview with each other or with anyone else. Do you understand? The three interviewers nodded. They looked stunned. They stood up and walked out of the conference room in silence. Their confident attitudes had completely disappeared. After they left, James turned to Marcus. Mr. Thompson, I want to apologize on behalf of TechVision. What happened here is completely unacceptable. It does not represent our company values. Marcus did not know what to say. He had never experienced anything like this. Usually, discriminatory interviews just ended badly, and that was it. No one in authority ever intervened. Dr. Rodriguez sat down at the table. I know this has been a difficult experience, but I need to ask you some questions. We take allegations of discrimination very seriously, and we need to document exactly what happened. For the next 20 minutes, Dr. Rodriguez asked Marcus detailed questions. What was said when? In what context? Marcus answered everything honestly. James's assistant took notes on his tablet. Meanwhile, another person entered the room. He was introduced as Robert Chen, a board member who specialized in technical matters. He had been in the building for meetings and had been called to the conference room. Robert asked Marcus technical questions about his work. But these questions were respectful and genuine. They were the kinds of questions someone asks when they actually want to understand a candidate's abilities. Marcus answered easily. He explained his projects, his innovations, his problem-solving approaches. Robert looked impressed. He showed James some of Marcus's published papers on his tablet. This is excellent work. Exactly the kind of thinking we need for the machine learning project we're launching next quarter. Dr. Rodriguez finished her notes. I'm going to need to review the video recording carefully, but based on what Mr. Thompson has told us, and what we observed directly, this appears to be a clear case of discrimination in hiring. James nodded grimly. I agree. Helen, please prepare a full report. Pull their hiring records for the past 2 years. I want to know if this is a pattern or an isolated incident. I'll start immediately, she said. She looked at Marcus. I suspect we're going to find a pattern. These things rarely happen in isolation. James sat down across from Marcus. Mr. Thompson, I know you came here for a job interview. What you got instead was harassment. I cannot undo what happened, but I can tell you what happens next. Those 3 employees will face serious consequences for their behavior. We will review all of our hiring practices, and I hope, though I would understand if you refuse, that you might still be interested in working at TechVision. Marcus was surprised. You're still offering me the position?
I'm not offering you the position yet, James said honestly.
I don't believe in giving someone a job out of guilt or to make up for bad treatment. But I would like you to have a real interview. A fair interview. One that actually evaluates your qualifications properly. Would you be willing to do that? Marcus sat in the conference room trying to process everything that had happened. The CEO of TechVision was sitting across from him. The head of HR compliance and a technical board member were there too. They were asking if he wanted a fair interview after witnessing the discrimination he had faced. Part of Marcus wanted to say no. He wanted to walk out and never think about TechVision again. The interview had been humiliating and exhausting. Why would he want to work at a company where people like Derek, Brad, and Jennifer felt comfortable being so openly biased? But another part of Marcus recognized something important. Companies were made up of people. Some people would always carry biases. What mattered was whether the company leadership would address discrimination when they discovered it. And James Park had not hesitated. He had intervened immediately. "I need some time to think," Marcus said honestly. "This has been a difficult morning." James nodded with understanding. "Of course. Take all the time you need. Would this afternoon be too soon, or would you prefer to come back another day?" "May I call my wife first?" Marcus asked. "Absolutely," James said. "You can use this conference room for privacy. Take as long as you need." James, Dr. Rodriguez, Robert, and the assistant left the room. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Sarah. She answered on the second ring. "How did it go?" Sarah asked immediately. Marcus took a deep breath. Then he told her everything. The discriminatory questions, the insulting salary offer, the CEO walking in, the promise of consequences for the interviewers, the offer of a real interview. Sarah was quiet for a long moment after he finished. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "Part of me wants to leave and never come back." But the CEO seemed genuinely upset about what happened. "He's promising to investigate and make changes." "Do you believe him?" Sarah asked. Marcus thought about it. "I think I do. He didn't try to defend them. He didn't make excuses. He acknowledged the discrimination directly and took action immediately." "Then maybe it's worth giving them another chance," Sarah said. "Not for them, but for you. You wanted this job because of the work they do. If the leadership is actually committed to fixing their problems, maybe this could still be a good opportunity." They talked for a few more minutes. Sarah reminded Marcus that he had done nothing wrong, that he deserved to be treated with respect, that whatever he decided, she would support him. By the end of the call, Marcus felt clearer about what he wanted to do. He opened the conference room door. James's assistant was waiting outside. "I'm ready," Marcus said. "I would like to have a proper interview." The assistant smiled and led Marcus to a different conference room. This one was smaller and felt more comfortable. Robert Chen was already there, along with two people Marcus had not met yet. They introduced themselves as senior developers on the machine learning team. This interview was completely different. The questions were professional and respectful. They asked about Marcus's technical experience in detail. They wanted to understand his problem-solving process, his approach to team collaboration, his thoughts on emerging trends in artificial intelligence. Marcus found himself relaxing as the interview progressed. These people were genuinely interested in his abilities. They listened to his answers. They asked follow-up questions that showed they understood and valued his expertise. One of the developers had read his published papers and asked specific questions about his research. They gave him another coding challenge, but this time it was appropriate for a senior-level position. They gave him reasonable time to complete it. When he finished, they discussed his approach and offered constructive feedback. It felt like a conversation between colleagues, not an interrogation. After an hour, Robert asked Marcus if he had any questions about the position or the company. Marcus asked about the team structure, the current projects, the company's vision for AI development. Robert answered thoroughly and honestly. When the interview ended, everyone shook hands. Robert told Marcus they would be in touch soon. Marcus left the building feeling very different than he had an hour earlier. This second interview had shown him what tech vision could be when discrimination was not poisoning the process. Marcus walked to a nearby coffee shop and called Sarah again. He told her about the second interview. "It was completely different," he said. "They treated me like a professional, like someone whose expertise they valued." "That's how it should have been from the start," Sarah said. "I know, but at least the CEO made sure I got a fair chance once he found out what happened." Marcus drove home. He spent the rest of the day with his family trying not to think about the interview, but his mind kept returning to it, both the bad part and the good part. He wondered what would happen to Derek, Brad, and Jennifer. He wondered if James Park would actually follow through on his promises. The next morning, Marcus received an email from Dr. Rodriguez. She asked if he could come to TechVision's office that afternoon for a meeting. She did not say what the meeting was about, but Marcus agreed. When Marcus arrived, he was taken to a large conference room. James Park was there along with Dr. Rodriguez and Robert Chen. They invited Marcus to sit down. "Thank you for coming," James said. "I wanted to update you on what has happened since yesterday. First, we reviewed the complete video recording of your initial interview. What we saw confirmed everything you told us. The discrimination was clear and extensive, Dr. Rodriguez continued. We also reviewed the hiring records for Derek Hastings, Brad Kaufman, and Jennifer Morris over the past 2 years. We found a disturbing pattern. They interviewed 15 highly qualified candidates from minority backgrounds during that period. All 15 were rejected. The stated reasons were always vague: culture fit, attitude concerns, insufficient technical skills. But when we looked at the candidates they accepted, Robert added, we found people with significantly weaker qualifications. Less experience, fewer credentials, lower performance in technical assessments. The only consistent difference was race. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. So I wasn't the only one. No, James said quietly. You were not. And that makes this even more serious. This was not a mistake or a bad day. This was a pattern of systematic discrimination in our hiring process. Dr. Rodriguez opened a folder. We pulled the applications from those 15 rejected candidates. With their permission, we're going to offer all of them new interviews with different interview panels. We're also implementing new policies to prevent this from happening again. James leaned forward. I called you here today because I wanted to tell you all of this personally. And because I wanted to offer you the senior developer position. The salary would be $100,000, which is at the high end of the posted range. You've more than demonstrated that you deserve it. Marcus was stunned.
You're offering me the job?
Yes, Robert said. Based on your qualifications, your interview with us yesterday, and the clear evidence of your abilities, you are exactly what we need for this role. The offer is genuine and has nothing to do with what happened in the first interview. We would want to hire you regardless. We also want to offer you an additional opportunity, James said. We need someone to help us redesign our hiring process, to work with HR to create better training, better oversight, better practices. You've experienced firsthand what discrimination in hiring looks like. Would you be interested in consulting with us on that? In addition to your developer role, we would compensate you additionally for that work. Marcus did not know what to say. 24 hours ago, he had been sitting in a conference room being told he was not qualified for this job. Now the CEO was offering him the position plus additional responsibility and compensation. I need to ask, Marcus said carefully. What happened to Derek, Brad, and Jennifer? James's expression became stern. They were terminated. Immediately. Their behavior violated company policy, federal employment law, and basic human decency. We cannot and will not tolerate that kind of discrimination at Tech Vision. They're fighting it, Dr. Rodriguez added. They've hired lawyers. They're claiming they did nothing wrong, that this is an overreaction. But we have video evidence, documented patterns, and multiple witness statements. We're confident in our decision. Robert pulled out his tablet. I also want you to know about the team you would be joining. These are the actual developers you would work with daily. He showed Marcus profiles of the team members. The team was diverse, different races, different nationalities, different backgrounds. Several team members had sent messages saying they were excited about the possibility of working with Marcus. They had looked up his published papers and were impressed. These are your real colleagues, Robert said. Not Derek, Brad, and Jennifer. Those three were not representative of Tech Vision's culture. Unfortunately, they were able to hide their biases until yesterday. James stood up. Marcus, I know we're asking you to take a risk, to trust a company where you experienced serious discrimination. I can't promise that everyone here is perfect, but I can promise that our leadership takes these issues seriously. When we discover discrimination, we act on it. We don't hide it or make excuses, Dr. Rodriguez added. We're also implementing mandatory bias training for everyone involved in hiring. We're changing our interview process to include diverse panels. We're creating an anonymous reporting system so employees can report concerns without fear, and we're committing to regular audits of our hiring data to identify any patterns of bias. Marcus looked at each of them. James Park, who had intervened without hesitation. Dr. Rodriguez, who had documented everything carefully and investigated thoroughly. Robert Chen, who had given him a fair interview and recognized his abilities. Can I have until tomorrow to give you my answer? Marcus asked. Of course, James said. This is a big decision. Take the time you need. That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table with Sarah. The children were already in bed. The house was quiet except for the soft sound of rain against the windows. Marcus had told Sarah everything about the meeting with James Park. They fired all three of them, Sarah said. She was not asking a question. She was processing the information. And they offered you the job at the high end of the salary range. plus asking me to help redesign their hiring process, Marcus added. They're serious about making changes. Sarah was quiet for a moment. What does your gut tell you? Marcus thought about it. My gut says that what happened was terrible. But the company's response was right. They didn't try to cover it up. They didn't defend the interviewers. They took immediate action. But can you work there? Sarah asked. After what you experienced? It was the question Marcus had been asking himself all afternoon. Could he walk into that building every day knowing what had happened there? Could he trust that the discrimination he faced was truly being addressed? I think I can, Marcus said slowly. Not because the discrimination wasn't real, but because the leadership showed me they won't tolerate it. James Park could have ignored what was happening. He could have walked past that conference room and pretended not to notice. But he didn't. Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. Then I think you have your answer. The next morning, Marcus called James Park. I accept the position, he said. Both the developer role and the work on improving hiring practices. I'm very glad to hear that, James said. Marcus could hear the genuine pleasure in his voice. Welcome to TechVision, Marcus. The right way this time. They discussed start dates and logistics. Marcus would begin in 2 weeks, giving him time to wrap up some personal matters and prepare for the new role. James also scheduled a company-wide meeting for the following day. He wanted to address what had happened without naming Marcus specifically. Marcus's first day at TechVision arrived 2 weeks later. He felt nervous as he walked into the building, but it was a different kind of nervousness than before. This time he was nervous about starting a new job and meeting new colleagues, not about facing discrimination. Robert Chen met him in the lobby and took him up to the 6th floor, where the development team worked. The office space was open and collaborative. People worked at desks but also gathered in small groups around whiteboards discussing problems and solutions. Robert introduced Marcus to the team. There were 12 developers in total, working on various artificial intelligence projects. They welcomed Marcus warmly. Several of them mentioned his published papers and said they were excited to work with him. One developer, a young woman named Lisa Kim, said, "We heard about what happened during your interview. Not the details, but we know it was bad. I want you to know that's not who we are. We're glad you gave us another chance." Marcus appreciated her honesty. "Thank you. I'm glad to be here." Over the next few days, Marcus settled into his new role. The work was challenging and interesting, exactly what he had hoped for. His colleagues were smart and collaborative. They asked for his input on problems. They valued his expertise. He felt respected and appreciated. Marcus also began his work on improving hiring practices. Dr. Rodriguez set up meetings with HR staff, department managers, and other stakeholders. Marcus shared his experience and offered suggestions based on what he had learned. They implemented several changes. All interview panels now had to include at least 3 people from diverse backgrounds. Interviewers received mandatory training on recognizing and addressing bias. Every interview was recorded and a sample would be reviewed quarterly by HR. Candidates could report concerns through an anonymous system that went directly to the board of directors. Dr. Rodriguez also completed her audit of hiring data from the past 2 years. The results were sobering. Derek, Brad, and Jennifer's department had rejected qualified minority candidates at a rate far higher than other departments. The evidence of systematic discrimination was clear. TechVision reached out to all 15 candidates who had been rejected. They offered sincere apologies and opportunities for new interviews. 9 of the candidates agreed to be reconsidered. After fair interviews, 6 were offered positions and 5 accepted. Marcus met some of these new hires as they joined the company. One of them, a man named James Okafor, had been rejected the previous year despite having a PhD in computer science and 5 years of industry experience. James told Marcus, "I thought I had failed somehow. I kept wondering what I did wrong in the interview. Now I know it wasn't me. It was them." 3 months after Marcus started at TechVision, James Park held a company-wide meeting. He talked about the changes that had been implemented. He talked about the company's commitment to fair hiring and equal treatment. He did not name the fired employees, but everyone knew who he was talking about. "We failed some candidates," James said to the assembled employees. "We allowed bias to infect our hiring process. That failure is on leadership, including me. I should have been more vigilant." I should have questioned patterns in our hiring data sooner. But we're taking steps to ensure it doesn't happen again. He announced that diversity and inclusion would now be part of every manager's performance evaluation. Departments would be measured not just on who they hired, but on how they conducted the hiring process. Any concerns about discrimination would be investigated immediately. After the meeting, several employees approached Marcus privately. They thanked him for speaking up. They said his courage had made the company better. Marcus appreciated their words, but he felt uncomfortable being seen as a hero. He had simply refused to accept discrimination. Anyone should do that. Meanwhile, Derek, Brad, and Jennifer were struggling. Word had spread in the industry about why they had been fired. Other companies were hesitant to hire them. They had filed legal claims against TechVision, but their lawyers told them the video evidence was damaging. The case would be difficult to win. Derek particularly tried to portray himself as a victim. He gave an interview to a local news outlet, claiming he had been fired for conducting a tough interview and that TechVision was being overly sensitive. But the reporter did some investigating and found other candidates who had similar experiences with Derek. The article that came out was not sympathetic to Derek's position. 6 months into his role, Marcus led a successful project that improved TechVision's machine learning algorithms significantly. The project earned recognition throughout the company. James Park personally congratulated Marcus and recommended him for promotion. Marcus was promoted to lead architect, a position that came with increased responsibility and compensation. He now led a team of developers working on cutting-edge AI projects. His work was challenging and fulfilling. More importantly, he felt valued and respected. The promotion was based entirely on his performance and abilities. No one questioned whether he deserved it. No one suggested he had received special treatment. His colleagues celebrated his success because they had seen his excellent work firsthand. Marcus also continued his work improving hiring practices. TechVision's diversity numbers began to change. The company hired talented people from various backgrounds, races, and experiences. The workforce became stronger because they were selecting the best candidates based on actual qualifications rather than biased assumptions. 1 year after his difficult interview, Marcus was invited to speak at a company event about inclusion in the workplace. He stood on stage and looked out at hundreds of TechVision employees. Among them were the new hires who had been given second chances. Among them were employees who had witnessed discrimination and now felt empowered to report it. Marcus told his story, not to embarrass the company, but to illustrate why these changes mattered. He talked about the humiliation of that first interview, the relief when leadership intervened, the decision to give TechVision another chance, and the rewards of working for a company that was willing to confront its failures and improve. "I almost walked away from this opportunity," Marcus said. "I almost let discrimination convince me that I didn't belong here. But I'm glad I stayed. Not because the discrimination wasn't real or serious, but because when leadership discovered it, they acted on it. They didn't make excuses. They didn't protect the people who were wrong. They chose to do better." After the speech, many employees approached Marcus. Some shared their own experiences with discrimination in past jobs. Others thanked him for helping create a better workplace. A young black intern told Marcus, "I'm glad you're here. It shows people like me that we can succeed in this industry." That comment stayed with Marcus. He thought about the young intern navigating the same industry that had given Marcus so many challenges. He hoped that by speaking up and pushing for change, he had made the path a little easier for the next generation. Marcus still faced challenges at work. Not every day was perfect. He occasionally encountered small biases or misunderstandings. But the difference was that now he worked for a company where he could address those issues, where leadership would listen and take action, where he was not alone in pushing for fairness. Sarah often asked Marcus if he regretted taking the job after everything that happened. His answer was always the same: "I don't regret it. What happened in that first interview was wrong, but the company's response was right. And the work I'm doing now, both technical work and work on hiring practices, makes a real difference." On quiet evenings, when Marcus sat with his family, he thought about his journey, from that humiliating interview to his current position as lead architect, from facing 3 people who tried to tell him he did not belong, to leading a diverse team working on important projects. He thought about Derek, Brad, and Jennifer, who had been so confident in their discrimination. They had never expected to face consequences. They thought they could continue to reject qualified candidates based on bias and no one would notice or care. They were wrong. Marcus thought about James Park, who had not hesitated to intervene when he saw something wrong. About Dr. Rodriguez, who had investigated thoroughly and implemented real changes. About Robert Chen, who had given Marcus a fair chance to demonstrate his abilities. Most of all, Marcus thought about the other candidates who had been discriminated against over the years. The ones who had been rejected and never got a second chance. The ones who blamed themselves instead of recognizing the bias they faced. The ones who gave up on companies or careers because of discrimination. Marcus knew he was fortunate. Many people face discrimination in hiring and never get justice. The person who discriminated against them never faces consequences. The company never changes its practices. The victim is left to wonder what they did wrong when the fault was never theirs. But Marcus also knew that change was possible. Not easy, but possible. It required leadership willing to acknowledge problems. It required victims willing to speak up despite risks. It required systems that made discrimination harder to hide and easier to address. 2 years after his first day at TechVision, Marcus received an award for his contributions to both technical innovation and workplace improvement. At the ceremony, James Park said, "Marcus Thompson represents the best of what TechVision can be. Excellent at his work, committed to making our company better and willing to push us to live up to our values even when it's uncomfortable." Marcus accepted the award with gratitude. But he knew the real measure of success was not the award or his title or his salary. The real measure was that when his children asked him about his work, he could tell them he worked for a company that tried to do the right thing. That when discrimination was discovered, it was addressed. That people were judged by their abilities and character, not by bias and assumptions. The journey had been difficult. The first interview remained one of the most humiliating experiences of Marcus's professional life. But it had also led to real change, not just for Marcus, but for other candidates who came after him. It had exposed a problem that might have continued for years if no one had intervened. As Marcus drove home that evening, a ward in the passenger seat, he felt a sense of peace. He had not let discrimination define him or defeat him. He had stood up for himself with dignity. He had worked for a better outcome, not just for himself, but for others. And he had found a place where his abilities were valued and his contributions mattered. That, Marcus thought, was what success really meant. Not the absence of discrimination, because that would always exist in various forms, but the presence of systems and people willing to confront it, the courage to speak up when treated unfairly, the strength to keep pushing for change even when it would be easier to walk away. Marcus Thompson had done all of that. And in doing so, he had not only changed his own life, but had helped change an entire company's culture. That was a story worth telling and a legacy worth building.